creative process? Well, uh, okay, I'm an introvert, so I get completely worn out by basically what I do for a living. So, um, I love teaching. It is my passion, but I actually lose. I get drained of energy from being around people for long periods of time. So what I've set up in my personal life are both small things, because I'm very aware of the of that lesson of break it down that the 2-year-olds taught me. So I have small things to recharge and nurture. I thoroughly enjoy reading. I was reading when I was 3 years old on my dad's lap, reading the funny papers. So good fiction is one very important way to unplug for me. We live in an area where there's lots of hills and forests, so take a walk, and the process of just nature just is very restoring. Uh, the bigger things, taking 3-day weekends, unplugging that way. Um, but one of the things that, because I thought about this question, one of the things that I find most interesting that nurtures my process is to not do it, but still do something, and that is volunteer outside my field.
Good.
And um, a tremendous revival and recharging and raring to go to the next creative process from things that had nothing to do with it. I did many years with Medical Reserve Corps, not as a medic, but as a what they call clerical. It's a disaster preparedness program, and it turns out that in a disaster like the earthquake in Haiti or any Katrina types, Hurricane Sandy, you need the American Red Cross and the first responders and all these. They need like two clerical for every medical, so that, and this doesn't this will sound familiar. The clerical supports the medical much as the rep supports the photographer. The clerical does all the business side of the disaster, and the medical person does the medical. So Medical Reserve Corps was just really refreshing for me. And then I got involved with Project Cuddle, which I was even farther afield from the work that I do as a creative professional, and that's a singular mission for the project. Their mission is to prevent or help prevent the abandonment of newborn babies, which is pretty much a prevalent thing in all over the world. Um, so that took me to a place that I never anticipated. But when I come back from a Project Cuddle or a Medical Reserve Corps event, I feel stripped of all of the stuff that built up from my process creatively, and I feel really freshened. It's a weird feeling. I feel new. Strange, but that's the feeling.
There's an irony, it seems to me, that when we focus on other people or taking care of their needs outside of ourselves, how much that can be refreshing.
Oh, well, that's it then, isn't it? Oh, you're right. That's it. That's it. That's actually it. Because the creative process is such a lonely one. You're so focused. I'm looking at this blank screen in front of me, going, "Okay, I got to write something." Yeah, you're right. The volunteer work takes me out of myself. Yeah, that you absolutely nailed it. That's exactly why it helps.
Back to your reading, what are
Mhm.
2 or 3 books that have affected or impacted you the most? And what books come to mind? And what about them made a difference to you?
Well, I read fiction, so there's that. That's going to skew the answer. I I've read all of the uh, Dean Koontz his fantasy series. because it just sparks it just sparks imagination to read about. It's fiction, but to read about things that are magical and fantastical. I've read all of the Anne McCaffrey Dragons of Pern because I just love the idea of a woman in science fiction writing, for one thing, and there's that, and the idea of the mating of the partnership between an animal and a human, and how close that whole series is about that process, that idea. What's another one? And I like mysteries. I like a lot of mysteries. But my earliest reading was really focused on my middle reading was most focused on science fiction. My very early reading was, of course, everything Nancy Drew. That was it. Devoured those books. It was crazy. I'd come home from the library. I'm short to start with, so I was a real little kid, and I'd come home from the library with a stack of 10 books as tall as me. So that's what I would do. I just love to read, and I think now that a lot of those things did shape my how I see the world in a more open way than perhaps people that don't read outside their comfort zone, I guess. And if you just read the newspaper, for example, or if you just read economics books or accounting books, I mean, I think you'd get a view of the world. Mine's pretty eclectic, I guess.
Seeking
Which
broader
is good for my
interests.
business. Yeah, it does. I think it has broadened my horizons.
It's interesting as you say that. I realize how much I'm obviously drawn to readers. When Linda and I got married, she would tell stories about coming home. Every week would go to the library and come home with a back seat full of books. You couldn't even carry them all. Backseat of the car, her mom would drive her home, and she would devour the books that week and then go back in and pretty much read her way through a small town library.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my story. The steps, the children's library was in the basement, and I went down the steps lighthearted and came back up with a pretty heavy backpack. Yeah, exactly.
Who are some people? Who are some people who are doing work right now that you have your eye on?
Oh, who are some people that are doing that? In my field or in the world?
Yeah, who's inspiring? Who inspires your heart and soul in terms of what they're
Well,
doing that makes a difference?
sure. I have to say I'm entranced and possibly in love. I can, I'm married, so not really. But Elon Musk is one of the most fascinating people alive today, and his his very premise that nothing is impossible. It's fascinating. I love it, and it's not about my industry that he's in, but everything he does and everything he touches is about making changes that people thought, well, never thought of. Or if they did, they'd say that was impossible. We were actually at the Mojave Desert when they won the X Prize for the first time a private spaceship hit space. They, the level that they made astronauts out of everybody. It was a little scary because we didn't know if they'd make it down, but they did, and the pilot did. And that moment when, over the public address system, they announced the change of the airport. We're changing the name of the airport from the Mojave Airport to the Mojave Spaceport. That's when I fell in love. Like, oh, this dude, you got to watch this guy. I think closer to home, one person that inspires me, and actually we inspire each other, Tony Luna, out of Los Angeles. He teaches at the Art Center College of Design, and he writes kind of on the other side of the fence, I call it, from what I do. He focuses more on the creative process, and people say I focus more on the business, but as I've said, it's all one thing. But Tony and I have worked together, and his enormous energy and drive to help lift the creative process out of, the whole artist in the attic starving kind of thing. I just, that's wonderful. I really like that. I really like that. Oh, and locally, Heather Elder is an amazing rep here in town. She does these lunches for the art buyers, and wow, which I would never do. I mean, I'm an introvert. Why would I? God, it's bad enough I have to talk to these people. Why would I eat with them? Oh my God, no. Heather's not an introvert apparently, and she does these amazing blogs about these lunches with the clients and buyers. It's like people I admire and inspire me do everything I don't want to do. But it's nice because then I follow their exploits and adventures, and everything from lunches with art buyers to, or manned trips to Mars. That's my range of interests and inspirations.
Good. Well, it does, by looking at those inspirations, it does seem to move you as it moves people to a higher plane of expectation rather than not having that inspiration, not looking to people, but just looking inward for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you can't just look inward. You really have to look up.
Is there, along the same lines, is there someone you know who is outside of the spotlight but is doing something important that's having an impact in the world that we should know about?
I don't know if you're going to like my answer because it's not a someone as it is a group of people. But I have believed for some time now that teachers, and not at my level, not at college, because by the time they get to me, they're pretty well formed, but teachers pretty much at the elementary, junior high, high school level, I think are the most under-interviewed, underappreciated, undervalued group of people, at least in the United States. I have no experience outside with other countries and their education systems, but whenever I look to friends of mine, relatives of mine, now, in this third act here, these kids are grown and now they're teaching. So, and when I look to what they're doing, it is just so amazing and inspiring, and it reminds me of why I got into teaching. So, really, there's not any one person that comes to mind, but just teaching at that level where I won't go. I will teach up to 5 years old, and then college. The whole middle, I won't touch that. But the people that do have my lifelong respect and admiration, and I think they just don't get, any recognition, I think, or at least the recognition they deserve.
Not only do I like your answer, I love the answer because I agree that teachers have the capacity to make the greatest impact for good or not in the world.